What should you do in this kind of situation? We had the personnel of the project, and I managed to get 50% of our field workers to stay behind and help with doing the humanitarian aid. We had cars. Cars is a very scarce object. A lot of conflict is about getting hold of the cars. So we had to try to sort of, the soldiers were stealing the cars the whole time, and we had to go sort of being diplomatic and trying to get our cars back. It was about money. We happened to have some money, so we could actually pay for something. And then we had a diplomatic car from the Swedish embassy. So what we did was initially we bought diesel to get people to be able to pump water to this refugee. There was a mission station with a pump that had no diesel, so we had to provide the diesel so they could pump the water. We bought drugs in the city of Bissau. There were still some pharmacies in the city, so we could provide the drugs. And we organized clinics in the major cities. And we had some doctors and students who could sort of provide services to the population. And then we had people in Dakar, which is sort of the capital of Senegal, just north of this, who on a continuous basis could be able to provide us with these things. We had to be flown to the islands outside and then sailed over. Initially, we considered measles vaccination campaign, but we did not do it because coverage was high, and this was the rainy season, and I have some data which suggested that might not be a very good idea to vaccinate with measles vaccine in the rainy season. What we mainly did initially was food distribution. What happened was that the government took the World Food Programme's storage rooms and initially gave it to the Red Cross to distribute this food to all the refugees out in this rural area. And the Red Cross had no real experience in this kind of thing, and in the first 3 weeks they had only managed to reach 40% of the population. They sort of insisted on measuring individual portions to the refugees. That takes a hell of a time. So they were not able to do it. And they were only doing it to the internally displaced people because that was a donor policy. You should only give it to the internally displaced people, not to the resident people. We took over the distribution after 3 weeks, and then we distributed every 3 weeks. We distributed to this whole population of 50 to 60,000 people. We had a lot of conflict with the donors about this because they insisted on not giving to the resident people. When eventually, after 2 or 3 months, when the population started to went back to the city, I'm going to explain a little bit about that later on, we followed the population. Once the most people had sort of returned to the city, we stopped our distribution and therefore stopped the initial tendency to stay behind in the refugee area. So we moved with the population and we started distributing in the capital. During this 2-3 month period out in the rural area, we had this kind of distribution of population. You can see people coming here up, they have all been sort of visited at home and they've got a ticket they are entitled to food for 7 persons. A sack of rice, we were only 3 kilos per person, so a sack of rice is for 17 people. So you have to find sort of 17 people who have a ticket so you can get a sack of rice and you have to distribute it yourself. We did not sort of start distributing to the people ourselves. That takes too much time. During this first conflict out in the rural area, we did a survey. We took sort of the typical kind of survey that the vaccination program are using is a sort of 30 randomized clusters, and in each of these there were 14 children aged 9 months to 24 months, sort of 420 children that we registered, and these 25% were residents and 41% came from our rural area and then 34% from other parts of the capital. And we measured food aid, whether they have received or not received, and measured the arms circumference, the rice consumption, and additional expenditure, and we measured mortality, and we visited them every 3 weeks to update this information. Some of the things which came out here was that the proportion of severely malnourished children is children with an arm circumference below 130 millimeter. They increased strongest in the resident children. It was the children who used to live in the area who were most strongly hit by the nutritional status. And they also grew worse in children from our study area. As soon as people returned to the city, this armed circumference nutritional status disappeared. It went back to where it had been to pre-war. But interestingly here is that the residents actually had more food available. They ate better than the other families. They ate better than the migrants. So they had more food accessible. So initially distribution had only been for the refugees in the first month, but then we distribute to everyone. What's interesting here is that mortality was also significantly higher among the resident population. And mortality was particularly high in the initial part of the conflict before people returned. As soon as people returned to the city, mortality dropped to very little. Why would they be more malnourished and have higher mortality among the residents than among the refugees? I think those are the kind of questions which is important to answer to those who are dealing with these conflicts. My suggestion would be that the resident people were living in the inside of the house. They would be much more crowded. They would be much more intensively exposed to infections, where the migrants were living, staying in the open air, essentially, on the veranda. And open air, you are not getting so severe diseases as you are in the inside of a house. This is the mortality pattern we saw during this 1 year. You see in the first month of the conflict, this mid one is sort of the estimate of our mortality, the other is the confidence interval. So look at the mid one here. So we are roughly sort of between 2 and 3 times higher mortality than the usual. This is the usual mortality in this population. The war started, we had a ceasefire, people started going back. When everyone get concerned about things being stolen, we want to get back to defend our property. So people, even though all the donors and the warring parties sort of recommended them to stay away, people went back them home because they wanted to get back. They lived better back home. We had a second small war in October, and then a third one in January, and then the final one in May '99 when the rebel won. In all these situations, some people fled, but as soon as it was calm, they tried to return. Some people stayed in the interior, and it was mostly the people who stayed in the interior who continued to have the high mortality. People wanted to get back to secure their things, and they had to build shelters. So that's bags with sand in to sort of defend. This is it's difficult to see here with the light, but it's sort of a water channel. So you build a cover over the water channel to be able to defend you against the bombs.